Well, I wonder, are you afraid? Do you have a phobia? Well, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a phobia is an extreme or irrational fear or aversion to something. Our phobias have always been something that's fascinated me. A few I can understand to some degree: arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. I really don't do spiders. Or how about glossophobia, the fear of public speaking? That's one I can relate to as well. Others seem, though not to the people themselves, utterly ridiculous to us. Here are a few of my favourites, though I may not be pronouncing them correctly. Cherophobia, fear of cheese. Trypophobia, fear of small holes. A modern one, nomophobia, fear of being without mobile phone coverage. And one I hope no one is suffering from watching this, apogonophobia, fear of beards. And outercellurophobia, fear of high ceilings or high, expansive indoor areas. Now, I mentioned that last one because outercellurophobia happens to be my phobia. And though it's not as bad these days, at certain times in my life, particularly as a child, it was quite crippling. I remember a time before we were married, my wife and I went to the Natural History Museum in London. Everything had been all right. I'd planned my route. I'd made sure we went round the outer galleries first, but finally we made our way to the main area from upstairs. And then the fear hit me. I can remember it so vividly. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's vast. Well, I held onto the banister and I froze. I could only look at the floor. I couldn't turn and I could barely speak. Well, this was a new experience for Rachel, but she didn't worry. She didn't panic herself or make any kind of not so humorous, unhelpful quip. No, she just held out her hand and said, "You're okay. I'm here. You don't need to see where you're going. I'll guide you." And that's what she did. There was no turning back, but together we made it out and into the outside world. Well, I presume people thought I was just on day release and she was my carer, which is probably closer to the truth. But for me, it was a beautiful moment and one I'll always treasure and remember. In Psalm 56 we read, "When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God whose word I praise. In God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me?" Now that's strange, isn't it? When I am afraid, I shall not be afraid. Well, what did the psalmist David mean by that? Well, some of you know that David started his life as a shepherd boy. He'd fought off lions and bears. Later on, he took on and beat the giant Goliath, sharpshooter as he was, but he did that all with the Lord at his side. But are we expected to believe that David did all this without any fear, ever? No, I'm sure at times he was afraid, but not afraid to the point where he stopped believing that God would go before him in all things and help him get through. He knew God was with him, and he knew that he could lean on him for his strength. That was the only place that his strength came from. Just as I had to lean on Rachel that day for my strength in the museum. Also, and key really, he knew that this life was not the end. The worst that could ever happen to him would be that he would die, but then he would go be with God in heaven forever. A lose-win situation, if you like. Well, we read in Luke 22 the account of Jesus with his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. Well, before his betrayal, he prayed to God, his Father, knowing what awaited him. And he prayed this, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Now, I don't want to equate any of my situations to what the God-man Jesus faced. His pain, not just physical, but of bearing the sins of the world, is far, far beyond my understanding. But I also know that nothing would stop him on his mission to save mankind, a task that no one else could fulfill. And through this I am greatly comforted to know that he fully understands every aspect of my fears also. At no point in the Bible has God promised us that our earthly lives will be without trouble, will be without fears. Coming to faith in Jesus Christ does not mean an easy ride awaits you. In fact, you'll probably find it quite the opposite. Ask anyone who's been a Christian long enough, and they will no doubt have similar stories as mine to tell also. But they'll also tell you this, and know this: as a follower of Christ, when you are afraid, even though you may not have the strength to look up today, or know which way to turn, or even know what to pray, Jesus holds out his hand. All you have to do is trust in him and hold on. You don't need to see where you're going. He will guide you.